Good evening, I'm Jason Vio. Katarina is away tonight. Here's what's making news right now.
When I got to realize everything kind of sunk in and what they had come, I was very pleased that the submissions, most were accepted and hopefully to see some change.
Wow, it's just amazing. I didn't see like this in my life, yeah. We are just enjoying here with my children and my husband, yeah.
What do you girls think of the park?
I'm kind of a chicken. I don't like the big water slides, but I especially enjoy the splash pad.
We begin tonight with a new tax that has wine growers feeling squeezed. The federal tax on Canadian-produced wine came into effect just days ago on Canada Day, but as our Dale Molnar tells us, to avoid sour grapes, the feds are offering a different support program, one that's a relief to local wine producers.
The excise tax adds 51 cents to a bottle of wine. The federal government had to impose it to settle a dispute with Australia at the World Trade Organization. Australia complained of an unfair advantage given to Canadian wines. Wineries were concerned the excise tax would threaten the industry, but the wineries are happy with the federal support program that kicked off today.
It's actually better than I had anticipated. The industry is actually going to be given the grant money probably this fall, so well before we start paying tax. We only bottle wine about maybe 3 times a year, and our next bottling is late August, early September. So at that point, we will be paying the excise tax on any wine bottled in that period.
The wineries can access grants from a $166 million support program. The percentage they receive of that money will be equivalent to the percentage of all the wine produced in Canada at that time by them.
If your winery produces 10% of the wine in Canada, then you'll get 10% of the subsidy available.
The maximum compensation in a fiscal year is $25 million. The $166 million will be spread out over 2 years, 2 programs of about $83 million each. The head of the wine growers says the wineries need that help because it's hard to compete with foreign wines because of the heavy costs of production in this country.
You can go into the LCBO and buy an imported wine for like $10. And the reality is that the LCBO is paying for that probably about $3.50. I can't even make, the Canadian wine industry, because of labor costs and marketing boards, we can't even make wine for $3.50, let alone a whole bottle for $3.50. Like our bottle costs have gone from roughly 50 cents a bottle to well over $1.35 a bottle, just for the glass.
The wine growers feel this support program will survive challenges at the World Trade Organization because it mirrors the support programs other countries offer. The grant application process opens up today and runs for 6 weeks. Wineries expect to see some money flowing by fall. Dale Molnar, CBC News, Windsor.
With the future of abortion services now uncertain or banned in parts of the United States, many Canadians are expressing their support for access to health care. But pro-choice advocates in the U.S. say action, not words, are needed. And in nearby Michigan, the procedure is legal because of an injunction against a state law banning abortion. However, that injunction has been appealed. The CBC Windsor's Jennifer LaGrassa brings us the story.
Abortion services are still legal in Michigan right now, but the future of that remains uncertain after the U.S. Supreme Court struck down a ruling that guaranteed the constitutional right to the medical service. Should the state end up banning the procedure, people seeking abortion services may turn to Windsor for help.
To have it overturned, it's kind of like, there was shock. There was a lot of hurt, I think, and fear. I think people are looking to ask the question, like, what happens next? And what are the implications for Canada as a northern neighbor?
In Windsor, local politicians are wondering the same, weighing the logistics of helping Americans while also prioritizing Canadians in need of medical services.
As we see women in the States losing the ability to access that health care, they will come here. And with a healthcare system that is already struggling, we already know that we are short nurses, we're losing doctors and other healthcare professionals. Our wait times for other medical procedures and treatments is increasing. And so there's a very real concern that the decision in the States and the women coming to Canada seeking medical treatment will further add a barrier to women in Canada.
In 2020, there were more than 21,000 abortions performed in Ontario. That's according to the Abortion Rights Coalition of Canada. 15,000 of those were done at private clinics. Just over 5,000 were at provincial hospitals.
From a federal perspective, what we can look at is, again, how can we make crossing the border easier? And obviously there are barriers for many Americans that would want to cross over, not least of which is access to passports, for example. We know that also, obviously, healthcare is a provincial jurisdiction, but I think this is a situation where both the federal and provincial governments need to sort of talk to each other.
Last week, the Ministry of Health did not directly answer CBC's questions about plans to help American people who require access to abortion services. Jennifer Lagrassa, CBC News, Windsor.
The provincial ministry that oversees jails in this province now has 38 recommendations to review following an inquest into an inmate's death. 30-year-old Delilah Blair died by suicide in her locked cell at the Southwest Detention Centre in Windsor. That was on May 21st, 2017. Late in the evening last Thursday, though, a jury of 4 came back with dozens of ideas to help prevent similar deaths in the future. And a warning to our viewers, this next story contains references of suicide. Selena McIntyre sat through 9 days of the inquest into her daughter Delilah Blair's death. The most important thing she wanted the jury to recommend centered around an inmate's access to phone calls, and that came to fruition. The jury recommended the Ministry of the Solicitor General update policies to ensure phone calls to loved ones are not considered a privilege, as we heard during the inquest, but rather a priority.
Well, that's a little too late in my case, but that was a strong point for especially with Indigenous, with the bonds that we have with our families, and we all have large families. We're close, we're bonded. Being away from home, being in a different environment and under different authority, and you're alone, that's the best thing for them. And maybe this will lessen the rates of death.
Blair made multiple written requests to speak with her mom for nearly 2 months that she spent in jail. Those requests went unanswered. And the first time McIntyre knew Blair was even in jail was when someone called to say she died. During the inquest, 17 witnesses testified. Many of them were employees at the Southwest Detention Centre, and none knew Blair was an Indigenous woman with a Cree background and an Inuit upbringing. There were also no Indigenous resources available for Blair at the time. Witnesses did acknowledge, though, that Indigenous inmates with a deep connection to culture have different sets of needs, especially women. So the jury recommended Indigenous people must have access to spiritual elders. Cultural and spiritual supports should be a fundamental healthcare right to all inmates. The ministry should develop Indigenous programming, and workers should have more Indigenous-specific training.
Delilah Blair is a woman who shouldn't have been lost in the system in the manner that she was, and the unfortunate reality is, and Selena feels this too, is there's too many Indigenous women impacted.
Inquests are taken seriously, and that through the inquest process, the ministry has made a number of changes over the years. Change doesn't happen overnight, and we hope that this process shines a light on the things that do need to change.
And when Blair was found unresponsive in her cell, none of the several jail staff who responded brought a defibrillator or a knife to help with the ligature around her neck. So the jury recommended AEDs be placed in nurses' emergency response bags, and that a sergeant be required to bring that knife when rushing to an inmate emergency. The jury also recommended the government look into less tear-resistant bedding to reduce the risk inmates will die by suicide. A coroner's inquest is mandatory anytime an inmate dies in custody, and the government is required to respond to these recommendations, but there isn't any obligation for them to be implemented, although a government lawyer said during the inquest they will be carefully considered. Turning now to news south of the border, at least 6 people have been killed and 24 wounded in a shooting at a 4th of July parade in the Chicago suburb of Highland Park.
On a day that we came together to celebrate community and freedom, we're instead mourning the tragic loss of life and struggling with the terror that was brought upon us.
Authorities are searching for a male suspect who is considered armed and dangerous. The shooter apparently fired at the crowd from a nearby roof. Officials say a high-powered rifle was recovered at the scene. Eyewitness video shows families with young children walking on the streets just before gunshots rang out. Some victims died at the scene while hundreds, some visibly hurt, fled in terror. Police described the shooting as very random and very intentional. Russia is declaring victory in the eastern Ukraine province of Luhansk. It comes one day after Ukraine withdrew forces from its last stronghold in the area. That gives Russia control over half of the Donbas region, a primary goal in Moscow's invasion. Now, Russian forces are setting their sights on new targets in the other half of the region, Donetsk, and that's the Donetsk province. These are the smoldering ruins of a market in Slavyansk, the Donetsk province. At least 6 people died there yesterday. It's thought the city is now the next major focus for pro-Moscow forces, which already controls a significant amount in Donetsk. And although the war rages on, representatives from dozens of countries, international organizations, and businesses are meeting in Switzerland looking for ways to help Ukraine rebuild. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky gave a virtual address reminding the group that his country is fighting for the values of all Western democracies.
This war is not only our war, it is not simply a local war somewhere in the east of Europe. No, that is a Russian invasion against everything that we hold dear.
The president of the European Commission is there. Canada has a representative as well. The parliamentary secretary to the Foreign Affairs Minister has been meeting with Ukrainian officials. The participants are mapping out sort of a Marshall Plan, like the one that rebuilt Western Europe after the Second World War. Ukraine's Prime Minister has made a rare trip out of the country to attend the meeting as well. He is asking for $750 billion in aid to rebuild the nation. The Bank of Canada has released 2 new economic reports. 4 times a year, the bank surveys businesses for their outlook on what's happening in the Canadian economy. And in a separate survey, it asks consumers about their expectations. Peter Armstrong has more on the bank's latest findings.
Both the businesses that were surveyed and the consumers are really worried about inflation, and they're worried that it's going to last longer and go higher than any of us had previously thought. Now, within that, it really is important to point out that for all of the doom and for all of the gloom and all these very real concerns, there's also a portion of a very resilient economy out there that, jobs numbers are up and up solidly. We're going to see another really healthy jobs report added this coming Friday. GDP numbers were out last week and really did, they're the envy of the Western world. The OECD and the G7, Canada's doing very well, largely because the energy economy is doing very well, and Canada's economy does well when the prices of energy are up. But there's a really interesting line in the Business Outlook survey, the one that talks to businesses about what their forecast is. And yes, they say inflation's going to drive up prices, and inflation's going to drive up wages, and they're worried about supply chain and all of that. But they also said this: supported by strong demand, many firms intend to increase their investment spending and add staff over the next year. So that strong demand, that's a really good thing. That means consumers, in spite of inflation, are continuing to get out there and buy things. Those businesses are going to respond by investing in their businesses, which is a great thing. And it's a really good thing that they're going to add jobs, not just increase people's wages to not even keep up with inflation, but to address inflation, but add jobs. That's a really healthy and very good sign. And it's not something that we should discount when we're talking about how important this moment is in the economy. We're headed towards another decision from the Bank of Canada next week. We're going to see interest rates continue to rise. The question now is by how much? Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
Demand for plant-based meat products has simmered since the excitement seen a few years ago, but experts still see a place for the retail shelf for them. Jamie Strachan finds out if there's enough sizzle beyond the early hype.
When plant-based meat arrived on the market, few products arrived with more hype.
People saying, maybe not, I'm going to go entirely vegetarian, but I'm looking for ways to eat less meat. This was one of the good options that came became available on the marketplace. So people were excited to try it.
Investors flocked, fast food outlets rushed to add products to their menus, and consumers were curious.
Well, I thought it was great. I mean, to have a burger that actually tastes like meat, because I'm a rather recent vegetarian, it was rather exciting.
In 2019 and 20, the sale of plant-based products grew by nearly 40%, but dropped dramatically last year. Many large traditional meat producers scaled back planned production, and plant-based items disappeared from many menus.
When it comes to food service, it's definitely niche. And certainly any of us my colleagues and I who work in the industry, never thought it would be anything more than a niche.
Here we go.
For vegetarians, a key initial target audience, taste and concerns about the additives in many of the products drove them away. For meat eaters, most went back to just eating burgers.
The risk of trying to do a perfect analog is that if you're not quite as good, if you don't deliver on that promise, then people say, I tried it, been there, done that, I'm going to go back to what I like.
Experts say there is still a place for plant-based foods and predict the biggest area for growth is with consumers concerned about the impacts of beef production. The industry predicts measured growth in coming years as more innovative products emerge.
You're seeing continuous improvement with existing products, new products coming to market, because at the end of the day, if it doesn't taste good, consumers aren't going to buy it again.
Ewing says that when it comes to what Canadians put on their barbecue, beef or plant-based, taste is king. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
Do the clothes make the man? Or in the case of Sarnia Council, do the clothes make the councillor? There was a lively debate over a motion to adopt professional business attire for meetings. To show his disagreement, Councillor Nathan Colhoun wore a fedora and a tank top to the June 27th meeting. The motion for a dress code was defeated, but what do you think? Should there be a dress code for municipal councillors? You can head to our website, cbc.ca/Windsor. That's where you'll find a poll where you can have your say. And like so many other things, Adventure Bay abruptly closed in March of 2020. But today, the faucets turned back on at the city-run water park. And the timing really couldn't have been better given the current heat wave. Our video producer, Dara DiCarlo, went there to speak with some Adventure Bay lovers, hoping to catch a wave of their own.
The family atmosphere. Yeah, so it's wonderful to see the kids come together. And just the family atmosphere. You know the kids are safe and they're having a good time. Yeah.
Awesome, yeah. We've been waiting for about 2 years. Yeah, for it to come back, yeah. Everybody's really, really, really excited.
Yeah. What's the thing that you miss most about this place?
Just being able to come and have fun indoors while it's hot outside, and all of the attractions here, phenomenal.
This pool is amazing. It's my first day here, and it's just very amazing.
I think it's great. I think it's good for Windsor. Yeah, we enjoy it. Instead of heading up to Niagara Falls area, we got a nice water park here. Let's use it, right?
What's your favorite part about the slide?
That it goes really fast, that it got splashed in the face.
It's fun, and I'm very happy that I came here because it's really, amazing, and it's really amazing, and I love it.
Still to come here on CBC Windsor News at 6. A heat warning is expected to stick around into tomorrow. We'll have your full weather forecast coming up right after the break. And Sophia Kambalia joins us now for a look at weather. Sophia, it was such a nice long weekend. The days are kind of warm, but the nights are pretty cool. I must say I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah, a little birdie told me you enjoyed it from a camping trip. Is that correct, Jason?
Yeah, it was gorgeous.
What a
perfect day at the
for it.
beach. Yeah, absolutely.
So Murphy's Law, it's always the big giant storms that come on Canada Day long weekend. Not this time. Mother Nature had her own show in place. Who remembers the beautiful sunset from Friday, from Canada Day? We had videos coming in from viewers from all over the province, including in southwestern Ontario and Middlesex. Just a gorgeous show in the skies to go along with all the fireworks, where the forecast was agreeable. Not the case, though, for the next 24, 36, 48 hours. For those of you in southwestern Ontario, you are smack dab in the middle of an active storm track. 1, 2, 3, a few different systems coming in for really the first half of this work week. And what you will see for the long range is your temperatures will ebb and flow depending on when you have that humidity in the warm sector and then the clearing post-storm. Let's talk about the short range first, though. Tuesday will be quite oppressive and muggy. You are no strangers to that, but 43 in Windsor for Tuesday and 40 in Leamington. That is coupled with what will be some pretty beefy early morning storms. We're seeing the leading edge of the cloud deck now. They're over in Wisconsin right now. This is going to be an overnight and early morning story. Nocturnal storms that could last for quite a few hours, anywhere from the midnight mark to the 7 or 8 a.m. mark. Some pretty heavy downpours, really gusty winds, and frequent lightning. Let's talk about that for a minute before I let you go, because this could be quite the early morning alarm clock from Mother Nature with quite a bit of lightning in place. But what you'll find is after sort of a rainy first half of the day Tuesday, you will have some nice clearing into the afternoon and a much drier feel come Wednesday. That's not the end of it, though. The active storm track reignites late Wednesday into Thursday, and your temperatures will be seasonal, but with that humidity then for the rest of the work week. We'll tell you more about it in the next couple days, but until then, enjoy a really hot, muggy day Tuesday, Jason.
All right, thank you so much. 7-day looks quite nice.
Yeah, actually a lot of peaks of sunshine, which is quite nice. So get out and enjoy. And so far next weekend, A-okay.
Perfect. Thanks again.
We'll see you then.
Still to come, there is some dangerous flooding happening right now in Australia. That story is coming up next. Thousands of residents on Australia's east coast are dealing with a new round of life-threatening floods. It's the fourth time this year, and with more rain expected all week across New South Wales, the situation could get worse. Freelance journalist Phil Mercer has more from Sydney.
Parts of eastern Australia have been swamped by a month's worth of rain in just a single day. Major flood warnings have been issued. The New South Wales state government is warning that the region is facing life-threatening dangers on multiple fronts. This includes flash flooding, overflowing rivers and coastal erosion. Dozens of people have been rescued from the floodwaters, and thousands of residents in several Sydney suburbs have been told it's not safe to stay at home. More evacuation orders have been issued. Many people won't return until the floodwaters begin to recede later this week. Some areas are being flooded for the fourth time this year. For them, this must seem like a never-ending catastrophe of loss, displacement and uncertainty. It's all taking a massive financial and emotional cost on these communities. Environmental groups say that climate change is helping to fuel these reoccurring floods in Australia. The storms are battering a 500-kilometre stretch of the New South Wales coastline here in eastern Australia. This is a country well used to nature's extremes, but the severity of this latest natural disaster has taken many people by surprise. Their resilience is being tested yet again. More heavy rain is forecast over the next 24 hours. Phil Mercer for CBC News, Sydney.
A biologist with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans has come across a curious-looking crab. He made the find while researching oysters. Hopefully it's not wearing its feelings on its shell. It was posted at Deadman Island in BC. Now, some people believe the design was drawn on the crab, but a research scientist says it's not uncommon to see markings on this type of crab. That is, however, one crestfallen-looking crustacean. There you go, you learn something new every day. That's it for CBC Windsor News. Don't forget, for news anytime, head to our website, cbc.ca/Windsor. We're on social media as well. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The Rick Mercer Report is coming up next. Have a great night.